So some of you all remember a while back I did a video where I compared the BMW X1 to the MINI Countryman, and I said why I felt the Countryman was far superior to the X1. Well, I didn't compare it to the X2 yet. So I figured it only fair that I actually get my hands on an X2 so that I could do this video. And Baron BMW was kind enough, even though I'm going to be very critical of their car, to let me use one of their BMW X2s. So there it is. There's the Countryman in question. And this is a comparison of the BMW X2 to the MINI Countryman. So it seems only fitting that I would park the X2 in the shadows of the Countryman, as I find the Countryman far superior. But I figured it only appropriate that I actually get these two together to show you all why the Countryman is still better than the BMW counterpart. Now, both of these vehicles ride on the UK L2 platform. They are both front-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive systems, whereas the BMW is using the X-Drive system, while MINI is using the all-4 system. They are basically the same drive system. Yet, as I've stated, these two cars cannot be any more different. And the reason why is the way they are engineered. BMW touts themselves as being the ultimate driving machine. MINI doesn't do that. But these two vehicles are basically the same car. Is the X2 better than the Countryman, or is it the other way around? So let's start under the bonnet, where these two cars are virtually identical. This is the 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged B46 motor in the MINI Countryman. It puts out 189 horsepower. This is the same B46 2-liter 4-cylinder turbocharged motor, except in the BMW, this puts out 228 horsepower. Okay, so the BMW already has a slight advantage over the Countryman. The engine bays look virtually identical. So when I say they are virtually identical, I mean that. The airbox is the same. This strut brace is the same. This brace right here is the same. Now, why do I say that? This is the BMW, and here we are in the Countryman. The same brace, the same airbox, the same frame. So it's amazing with engineering in automobiles when they share platforms that parts on these cars are really quite similar and can transfer over from vehicle to vehicle. These engines are basically identical, but why does the BMW have more horsepower? The reason for that is BMW owners want more horsepower. They don't want to have the same horsepower as a MINI, so they bumped it up. The 228 horsepower on this B46 is actually the same horsepower that's on the John Cooper Works hardtop, as the John Cooper Works hardtop from 2020 onward uses the B46 engine. Now, inside the cars, they use the same transmission. They both use an 8-speed sport automatic. However, how they execute the interior fit and finish is, of course, quite different. So this is the interior of a 2021 MINI Countryman. Typical MINI fare. You have the nice black pearl cloth interior, you have the navigation system, you have the 8-speed automatic, and you have a JCW steering wheel, the new digital dash. Now, as this is my first foray into a BMW, let's see what we have in the X2. You get in here, we have very similar styled seats actually, a little bit more bolstering on the sides than you'd get in the Countryman. Same power seat functions. In fact, they're pretty much identical. Now, of course, you're all saying that's complete sacrilege. How can the BMW be identical to the MINI? Well, they're not, obviously. The styling of the seats is where it was similar. The interior of the X2 is very, very different. For one, this iPad-looking screen that pops up out of the dash. Okay, we got a nice menu here. We got navigation, simple control panel, no CD player, much like the MINI. Very similar. I can see some buttons that look like they're very similar to the other cars. Gauges, are analog, but this is a 2018 model, so obviously it's going to be slightly different. Back seats, of course, are going to be very different. So we're going to get into the BMW first, and notice their excessive use of the BMW badge. There are 4 BMW badges on this car, 2 on the sides and 1 on the front and back. But anyway, this is the back seat. Now the seat cushion looks similar to the Countryman in a way, but let's see what it's like to actually sit in this car. Okay, so I'm now sitting in the back seat of the BMW X2. Now, it's not bad, although the ceiling of this car, if I sit upright, is maybe a couple of inches from my head, and that's a little claustrophobic for me. So closing the door is not going to make it much better, but it is very, very tight back here. I mean, it feels very, very tight. I don't know why, other than the fact that that's the styling of this car. It is very, very tight back here, and I don't necessarily like that feeling. On top of that, look at that rear window. Now, there is barely any visibility back there. I mean, barely any visibility. I mean, that is a really small rear window. Conversely, climbing into the back seat of a MINI Countryman, I have a lot more space. There is at least 3 or 4 inches of height between me and the roof of this car. On top of that, look at that rear window. Lots of visibility out there. There is a lot of light coming through. It's a lot easier to see. The whole interior of the Mini feels very, very open, very, very spacious, which is kind of odd given that these 2 cars ride on the same platform and share the same mechanicals. But the styling is, of course, where things are completely different. We've gone around the styling. The only thing to do next really is to drive the BMW X2. So let's do it. So far so good. Now I can't see the fuel gauge down here, so I can't even see my odometer really, unless I tilt the steering wheel completely down into my lap. Then I can see it just fine, but I want it right about there. So if you have the steering wheel all the way up, you're not going to see your odometer, which is something the Mini doesn't have an issue with. We're going to take it on a quick loop around onto I-35. Okay, lane keep assist, that's rather nice. Not that I need lane keep assist. And onto the highway we go. Not too enamored with the blind spots at the back corners, but my mirrors are adjusted just so, and I don't think I have an issue there. We'll turn that off. Even in sport mode, the acceleration feels very slow. Now in the Countryman, when you put the car in sport mode, it actually adjusts the throttle response, and the throttle response makes it more quick. And this doesn't seem to be doing that. Now I apologize for the light flare in the corner. That's because of where the camera is mounted. That was the only place I could actually mount the camera in this car, as it's a little bit lower profile. It makes it a little bit difficult. Still can't see my odometer down there. We're gonna hop off onto Antioch Road. So far, my overall impressions are it drives fairly decent for a BMW. It doesn't feel like a Mini, obviously, but it does drive nicely. Now, it's still not one of my favorite models, but it's not bad. We're back off the highway. We're on a main city street. It's kind of smooth, very comfortable, just as compliant as the Countryman would be. Feels about the same, really. Although the bumps are a little bit smoother. It's really strange. I'm not a fan of all BMWs, but I am a fan of some BMWs. I don't know how I feel about the X2. I really don't know how I feel about this car, because it's just different given the fact that it's almost too Mini to be a BMW. And what I mean by that is this car is so much a Mini that it almost isn't a BMW. It is a Mini Cooper Countryman in BMW clothes, which is really interesting. and it is something that BMW people have said about the 2 Series Grand Coupe, is the fact that it feels very much like a Mini and not so much like a BMW. Now, I closed the sunroof because we were getting some glare in here and it wasn't very comfortable. It's not bad, but the steering does feel a little bit more numb compared to the Countryman. The Countryman, it feels very responsive, even though it's a similar electric style steering. The X2, not so much. Now we're gonna get onto this last leg of the Miriam loop to go back to the dealership and do something that I normally do with my Countrymans. And I don't feel nearly as confident going around these corners in the BMW than I do in the Mini. That really did not feel pleasant to me. That felt very nerve-wracking. I don't know why. And what's funny is this car has a slightly lower center of gravity in the fact that it has a shorter height in its body. It sits shorter than the Countryman, so the fact that it feels less planted than the Countryman is really saying a lot. That was definitely an interesting feeling, to go around that corner in a car that's built on the same platform and not feel like you're in total control. The steering feels very responsive in sport mode, but it also feels very electric. It doesn't feel necessarily like it's actually connected to anything. And I know it's actually connected, but it just feels very, very different compared to the Mini. So basically, what exactly is the BMW X2? This is BMW's version, basically, of the Countryman, even though the Countryman was basically built by BMW, so it's kind of an interesting scenario. I think this is the car that was created because there were BMW customers that liked the Countryman, but didn't want to drive the Mini. And I've encountered this before, that there are BMW people out there who despise Minis for some strange reason. So they had to create this car to cater to those who liked driving the Countryman, but didn't want to drive the Countryman. So they created the X2. It's a very nice vehicle. It's definitely not as boring as the X1 is. But is it as fun to drive as the MINI Countryman? Yes and no. Styling is a little bit different. The drive feels about the same, although the steering doesn't quite feel as precise as the Countryman does, which is really strange. This has more horsepower. You can also get a lot of horsepower in the Countryman if you go for the John Cooper Works variant, which is basically the same as the X2 M35i. I think the Mini is still far more fun to drive, but I'm gonna have to say this, it's pretty darn close between the two cars. I mean, the X2 definitely feels about the same as a MINI Countryman, aside from a few details, and the Countryman feels very much like the X2 in a way as far as how it drives. The styling is obviously different, the engines are the same, the drivetrains are the same. It's basically the same car, but in a way it's not, and I feel like there's something special about the X2. I think that if Mini had wanted to, they could take the X2 styling, make it more Mini Cooper, and you would have the Mini Paceman. This could basically be a Mini Paceman if you made it a two-door and kept this low-slung roof. So in conclusion here, I have this MINI Countryman and I have this X2 around me. What did I think of the X2 when compared to the Countryman? Well, great car overall, very, very nice. It's still very fun to drive. However, my money is still on the Countryman because I still think the Countryman's a better vehicle. I still think it's more fun to drive, and I just can't wrap my head around the fact that they put 4 badges on a BMW and the fact that the headroom in the back is so cramped. Effectively, they are siblings, or maybe cousins. We could go either way. Which one would you pick if you had to pick between these two cars? I'm asking you this because my opinion is obvious. that I'd go with the Mini, and that's a very biased opinion. But there are those of you out there who would go with the X2. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like below. Don't forget to comment, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And as always, before I let you go, I'm just going to remind you that life is too short to drive a boring car. So, well, you know exactly what I'm going to say. Drive a Mini. Absolutely drive a Mini. I'll see you all in the next video.